Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the latest reports of Sunak's Plan B for if and when he loses his court case against his own COVID inquiry, something that independent legal experts think is almost certain. The government are applying for what's termed a Section 19 agreement with the inquiry, which would limit what information can be made public. Now, this is interesting because it gives some insight into what Sunak is afraid of being revealed to the public, and it's not necessarily what I thought it might be. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, Rishi Sunak is fighting tooth and nail to prevent the COVID inquiry getting hold of messages between ministers and officials, I think what we can put it down to. Boris Johnson is doing likewise, but he's been a bit more cunning about it. I should probably begin by noting, because I've had a lot of comments about this. Although it's been reported that Boris Johnson has written to the head of the inquiry, Baroness Hallett, to tell her that he is happy to hand over all of his records directly to her, this isn't actually true. It's not what he says in his letter. He has offered to hand over a small amount of completely irrelevant records, ones that have got nothing to do with what she's asking for. Her main focus is on the decision making in 2020 and a little bit into 2021. Boris Johnson is graciously offering to hand over messages from May 2021. This is not remotely helpful. He claims he can't hand over WhatsApp messages from the important period because it just so happened they're on this phone, right? And I didn't back it up onto another server. And just at the point at which the dodgy decision making stopped, I was told my phone's a security risk and I haven't turned it on for about 2 years. And if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. It's very nice. But it doesn't matter. No end of security experts have just said, turn it on in a secure environment, extract the messages, then turn it off again. Piece of cake. Also, Johnson's allies trying to defend him with this are actually making him look pretty shady, really. I don't know why the media are not making more of this. Johnson's defence here rests on not only everyone failing to understand how WhatsApp and phones work, but the fact that he carried out sensitive government communications on an unsecured device. Apparently, this device is so insecure that he hasn't turned it on for 2 years, but he was happily tapping away with sensitive information 2 years before that. But anyway, that's Johnson's antics. What about Sunak? Well, he has applied for a judicial review in order to block the inquiry getting the records they want. Talked about that yesterday. The case is expected to be heard very quickly, and Sunak is expected to lose very badly. But a report suggests that he has a backup plan. So he's applying for something called a Section 19. This refers to a notice which would prevent the inquiry from releasing some of the information that they scrutinise to the public. There's various references to it in the Inquiries Act 2005, which is the legislation that is used to underpin most public inquiries, including this one. I gather that the inquiry has to agree to Section 19 restrictions. So it sounds like the sort of thing Sunak will need to negotiate with Hallett for rather than simply impose upon her. And this may explain why he's seeking the judicial review as well as what he's really afraid of. See, I had assumed that the information most damaging to Sunak would be his financial mishandling. There's plenty of it. After all, the economy is ultimately the key policy area which wins or loses elections, and polling suggests that this is still very much the case now. Sunak was Chancellor at the time, and the economy is currently not doing very well. In fact, we're back to Liz Truss levels of chaos in the financial markets. Not that a fuss has been made about this in the mainstream media. So the public finding out just how corrupt and incompetently Sunak managed the country's finances, even without drawing on hindsight, could severely damage his prospects of an unlikely election win next year and weaken his already shaky authority within the party. But this Section 19 changes things. The suggestion is that it is to prevent the COVID-bereaved Families for Justice campaigners and others from being able to view some of the ministerial messages. Now, bear in mind, we've already had a snapshot of the sort of way ministers talked to each other, a very callous way in which they spoke to each other, as well as senior officials. We got this from the Matt Hancock WhatsApp messages, which he rather unwisely gave to Isabel Oakeshott so that she could write his book for him. She essentially misappropriated them and then leaked them. Now, if the bereaved, who were so badly let down by the government, were to see exactly how these ghouls were behaving as their loved ones died, not just the decisions they made, but the callous way in which they talked about them, it could make the inquiry much more of a cause célèbre than it's already going to be. And if either Sunak or any of his close cabinet colleagues are responsible for any of these sorts of very poor exchanges of the sort we saw Oakeshott leaking about Matt Hancock, that is likely to go down very badly with the public. Even if the current cabinet are largely out of the frame, it could be argued that these revelations will reflect poorly on the Conservative Party in general. So it seems that Sunak's main concern may be not so much the financial side of things, but how he and the government of the time handled the human side of things. For example, what if there's evidence in the records that senior ministers, maybe even including Rishi Sunak, knew that their policy of discharging patients early to care homes would kill many of the most vulnerable? What if the messages show they knew they were doing this? Might also explain why he's gone for the judicial review. See, I cannot tell you how many legal experts are just saying this whole thing is just off. There's something wrong about this. Makes no sense. Absolutely makes no sense because he's not going to win. And he'll have obliterated his claims of transparency with this move. And I said to myself, well, it would be a gambit to play for time, wouldn't it? That's what I thought in the video yesterday. It'd be a gambit to play for time. But what I couldn't work out is it doesn't give him enough time. If this was like a normal legal process that could drag on for years, sure, as long as it goes beyond the general election. But it's not going to, so it doesn't give him enough time. Well, maybe it does. See, I imagined he wanted that legal process to drag out until the general election. It's not going to do that. But maybe he just needs it to drag out long enough to negotiate his Section 19 with Baroness Hallett. Say to her that you can view anything you like. I've got no issue with you viewing anything you like. You're cleared. You've got that top clearance and all the rest of it. But I don't want ministerial messages being viewed by the public because, you know, out of context, all the rest of it. So he wants those ministerial messages subject to the Section 19 so that nobody outside the top team of the inquiry can view them or reveal the contents to the public. The problem with this is I would view this as making Hallett's job harder. This is a public inquiry and she needs to question people publicly. She will inevitably want to question ministers and senior officials and surely would want to question them about what's revealed in the messages. Now, if all that questioning has to take place behind closed doors because she wants to ask about something that's subject to a Section 19, it becomes much less of a public inquiry. After all, what ministers said to one another, as well as what senior officials told them, will be the most relevant evidence for the inquiry. Now, that doesn't mean that the inquiry couldn't then draw the right conclusions or that it wouldn't be of value because the inquiry would still get to ask these people about it. It's just that we, the public, wouldn't really be seeing much of that process going on. But if the inquiry cannot publicly ask specific questions about comments or decisions, you know, which have to be kept from the public, that is going to limit them. It's certainly going to limit the perception of the public inquiry because the public will be saying, well, what's public about this inquiry? Now, I'm no expert, but I am guessing Section 19 is intended to be used to either protect genuine national security issues or in some cases protect innocent officials from excessive public scrutiny for which they are not responsible for the maelstrom that's flying around. I don't think it should exist to protect ministers from public scrutiny, ever. The article reporting this suggested that the information would still come out, but of course years later. But as I said, I don't think Sunak minds what comes out after the election. This is all about preventing disclosures beforehand. After the election, he'll almost certainly step down. The Conservatives will attempt to move on from those who were at the very top of government during 2020 anyway, so that they can denounce those responsible for what will inevitably come out at some point. Boris Johnson's gone, Rishi Sunak will be gone, Matt Hancock's gone. You know, so if they're creating themselves like a new guard, then the party can move on. Mind you, if anything comes out shortly after the general election, I mean, they're probably hoping it don't come out for like 20 years. If it comes out shortly after the general election, Suella Braverman might be in trouble. See, she was Attorney General at the time. Now, it is, of course, possible she didn't take part in a lot of the discussions about healthcare or financial decision-making, but she must have been involved in some top-level discussion still, because she would surely have been used to inform the COVID regulations that kept changing throughout that period. She, after all, is the political legal advisor for the government, or she was. Now, whether Baroness Hallett would agree to any of these Section 19 orders being made, I don't know. Obviously, I've got no idea about the process. I just heard about it yesterday. I imagine it would be reasonable to grant some in order, as I said. There will be genuine national security grounds for some. Again, I have no issue with them being used to protect officials. You know, they were trying their best. They weren't responsible for policy. I don't think she should agree to protect ministers. But we may find out in a few weeks, because as soon as Sunak loses this judicial review, which should hopefully be long before the summer recess, or at least before it, we are getting towards it, the Cabinet Office will then presumably be ordered to hand over the documents pronto. If they don't have the Section 19 orders in place by then, I would imagine it'd be a little bit late for them to cover their tracks. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.